Before we begin this episode of Night's Watch, I'm just letting you know that the launch campaign for the graphic novel adaptation of my book, Shadow of the Conqueror, is now live. Yes, it's taken us a while to get there, but now it is happening. And so if you want to get your hands on a premium, top quality graphic novel with some of the best art that you will find. Mike S. Miller, he's a industry veteran, absolutely phenomenal color work as well, and the story, if I do say myself, is pretty awesome. Get your hands on it, but not only that, there are special collector edition covers. Also, there's a second edition version of my book that's available, and you can get it with a new cover, a brand new cover by Chris McGrath, looks amazing, and special collector edition covers. These are the graphic novel covers that you can get on the trade second edition version of my book, limited time only, and on top of that, leather bound. Yes, I love leather bounds. Leather bounds are absolutely awesome. And now you can get leather bound Shadow of the Conqueror as well as the graphic novel for a very limited time. These are premium, display quality, absolutely beautiful leather bounds. That's all available in this launch campaign. So please go check it out. You won't be disappointed because it is top quality stuff. You'll really enjoy it. And also share it with your friends. Let's try and push this launch campaign as far as possible, because this is what we need to do to try and regain, the culture, entertainment that we want, the good stories with great heroes and everything, and just celebrate good writing. This is what I'm trying to do to bring back stories, good stories that we can really enjoy and really appreciate. The stories of heroes, conflict, so all the great stuff. It's an action adventure. So if you like that type of stuff, you'll really like this graphic novel, and it will also help me push forward to do even more. Not only the other volumes to complete the adaptation of my book, but also launching my own comic book universe. I have big plans, but that is all reliant on us pushing this launch campaign to be as successful as possible. Your help would be absolutely awesome if you share it with everyone. But not only the help, you will love this graphic novel, okay? It is really, really great. So make sure you get your copy, and guys, leatherbound. Leatherbound are so nice. So get your copy of those as well if you're able to. Hope you will, and yeah, you will love it. Welcome back to The Watch, and oh boy, House of Dragons, episode 5, right out of the gate. Gotta tell you, I bloody loved this episode, okay? Might be my favorite, but so far, House of Dragons, seems to be getting better and better. And look, I didn't like episode 4 as much, still very competently well done. Those are more my subjective tastes that I didn't like in it. But this one I really liked so much, and there was not a lot of action in it per se, but the character work, and it's just execute some things that are very difficult to do, but they do it really, really well, multiple times. So this episode, more than just once, leaves certain things unanswered, unexplained, and usually that's a big flaw in shows because it's confusing. It's like, why did they do that? But they have set up and defined the characters so well and set up the events that leads to these, actions, that when certain things take place, the show doesn't tell you the reason why, but because so much has been set up in the characters, we can infer what could have possibly been the cause. And what I love about that is that there can be multiple answers sometimes. Sometimes these answers might contradict someone else's thoughts on it, but they're all valid and justified. I've seen very few shows ever do that and pull it off really well. This show does it. Now, there are certain scenes that some might actually think are plot holes as a result, but when I look at it, and I've already been discussing this with Gary from Nerdrotic and Mola and now Jane Theory, is that a lot of these unanswered kind of actions, there seems to be some clear reasoning behind it that you can figure out just through the context, which is brilliant. Then there are subtle little things. This show is so clever and careful in making sure that anything that appears on screen is there for a reason, and it's either indicating something, paying off something, and there are sometimes really subtle small things that if you're watching carefully, you'll notice, and it's indicating something that's ready to be set up, or a character motivation, or any number of things. Alicent in this episode was a highlight for me. She really kind of starts to do certain things. So, as you probably are aware, this is the non-spoiler kind of discussion of the episode. Yeah, I really liked Alicent in this. The King is also great, and Daemon, played by Matt Smith, phenomenal. There were moments in this episode where I literally, reacted. Now, when you say, I mean strongly, where I see something happens and I'm like, oh yes, right? To get a reaction like that out of me, it's a strong, of course, sign that I'm really enjoying this show, and so few media has been doing that these days. This legitimately got me. I'm so invested, I'm so engaged, and I'm enjoying it. I have had to force myself through Rings of Power, which is just awful, and She-Hulk, and sitting down to watch House of the Dragon, I felt joy. It's like, I felt relief. It's like, I get to watch something good, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed this episode nearly as much, maybe even more than episode 3. I loved episode 3 because of the action, the spectacle of it. It was great. This episode I actually think is even more consistent than episode 3, because there is that question in episode 3 as to, would the Crab King really have committed all his forces? This episode, I got such a high out of it because of what the implications were by certain things characters did, and got really invested, and the suspense was built up because I wanted to know what will happen. It could be this, it could be that, but it's going to be something crazy or big, and that just drew me in incredibly. And big stuff does happen in this episode. Brilliant, okay? I am now enjoying this show so much, I would call it great. The episodes so far. But this is the thing. You cannot, I think I might have mentioned this in another review, you can't make something this good by accident, okay? And not this consistently good in multiple episodes. I understand if people aren't enjoying this show, and perfectly fine, because some of the things might be considered a bit slow or even boring, but because, for me, these the politics in the show is all justified so well with the characters. I'm invested in the characters. Even the conversations between characters in the show, I'm drawn in and I'm engaged. It's really great. And sometimes some really powerful stuff that has huge implications are said in just conversations, and this is another sign of a very, very well-made show. And just contrast the praise that I am lavishing on this show versus Rings of Power. And I've gone into the show to be ready to be as critical, and I am as critical, as watching Rings of Power, and all I'm noticing is not only great things, the more I look, the more awesome things I find. It's like, oh, I didn't notice that. They even set that up, or something like that. Really, really good. I have seen people feel that this episode was like one of the worst ones because they feel there are plot holes in those elements that they don't explain. That's very intentional. The show wants, people to speculate as to what actually happened. Did they really do this, or what caused this and stuff? And for me, I think this is very clever on their behalf, because that is going to create so much kind of theory crafting around, this is the explanation here. And this isn't relying on the audience to fill in plot holes or anything like that, because they've set up the motivations of the characters, all right? Which then just leads us to just theorizing and discussing, and it's a heap of fun because there's so much meat to look to in what the characters have done, what the show has set up, to be able to find what those motivations are, and it's very, very well done. So this episode's probably an 8 out of 10 for me. Might even could push to a 9. I really liked it. Really, my favorite episode probably so far. Wow. And so let's now go into scene by scene, spoilers all the way, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you those moments where I literally just, reacted audibly in what was happening in the show, and we'll get to it chronologically. So right out of the bat, it's got an awesome castle, and so there's a couple of things that I have an inordinate appreciation from me. It's like, oh, cool castle, got my attention, right? Not only that, then we see this, first we don't know exactly who she is, but if you remember names you will, and what I notice is that the armor she's wearing, it's clearly leather, but this is very, shaped leather, where it's holding its shape very firmly. It looks like proper hardened leather with some kind of bronze bits, there's like a bronze bever there, and on the pauldrons. Also, the guy that she's speaking with, his armor as well, this is some of the best fantasy leather armor I've seen in anything. I'm kind of speechless. Usually it's like crappy, like really thin dress leather that wouldn't stop anything, where this is firm, shaped, hardened, and that's exactly what leather armor would look like if you were to make it out of, or one of the examples. And it's like brilliant. All right, so two small things. And by the way, it's also boob armor, and it's really functionally shaped boob armor. Also really, really cool. Now, this is one of those scenes that people are going to be discussing for a good while, okay? But it's pretty clear Daemon has come here to, again, you know, this is spoilers now, to kill his wife, okay? He's never liked her. She is not nice to him, and so she clearly hates him as well. And again, interesting discussion as to what their relationship is like. Was she as abusive to him to begin with? She's certainly very abusive here. Was it caused by him? But there's no other indication that that she was nice to him ever. I'm not saying it's justified for him to kill her, but it shows that they both loathe each other. Yet there are a couple of things that are done in this scene which indicate there are certain things that are not Daemon's fault. I really do think Daemon, after discussing it with Mauler, at first I was wondering, is Daemon, you know, like, determined to kill her? And he does look somewhat reluctant on the fence, but the other setup as to meeting her in this location and so everything, it really does seem to be like his intent is to kill her. She seems to realize this. At first she's mocking him pretty relentlessly, and then she says, "What will you do now? Strike the child down." So sorry, she refers to the heir, the princess, Rhaenyra, as the child. And then when she says, "Strike the child down," I'll skip forward because it's actually, so he casts aside in favor of a little girl. This is the moment where she starts to realize what's actually going on, and I actually feel it's done really well. So, will you strike the child down? Question mark. And then this is the kind of process of logic. If she's trying to figure out what is Daemon's kind of thought process here, what are his options? Okay, if he wants the throne, what you're gonna kill her, and then if not going to kill her, how else would he get the throne? Marry her, but hang on. Would he marry her? Oh, I'm his wife. She's standing in the way of a potential way for Daemon to get the throne if he truly wants to marry the princess. And she begins to realize what's actually happening here, especially Daemon meeting her just, you know, out in the open. And so you can see almost he's resigned to what he's doing, but she's probably never seen such a face on him before, or like in terms of, look at how reserved he is, that would also probably freak her out as well. And she reacts, she starts to realize what's going on. So look at how much information and meat that we're diving into here, just with these brief interactions. And so she realizes that this is not a good situation. She grabs her bow, right? And then she spooks her horse, and the horse rears. It was funny. Who caused it? Daemon is obviously being threatening, so she's feeling pretty, defensive. She reaches for a weapon, and the horse probably can sense the mood of the rider a bit as well, and so the horse reacts. Daemon looks to be reaching out for the horse, yet there's another moment that the show masks from us, because it almost looks like it's trying to settle the horse down right here. He reaches for it, but then it switches to where we can't see Daemon and the entire horse goes backwards. And so it almost seems like Daemon grabbed the horse and then pushed it fully over. We don't see it, and the show leaves that up for our own interpretation. But there is something that the show does not leave to our interpretation. That's what happens after. And so she is on the ground, back is broken basically, and at one part I was wondering if they were going to try and make this look like it's a mercy killing. Probably not, because she might have been able to survive it, and Daemon goes, and this part is like, you can't really interpret this any other way. But what's interesting about this scene is that it might not have been the moment he was intending, but why did he meet her there? And so, there's a lot to kind of look at and analyze just in that scene alone. I really, really like it. One thing that struck me as we've been watching these early scenes, even when they're on the boat, right, is how much better this show looks than Rings of Power. I mean, look at that. That's obviously a mixture of practical and CG effects, but I actually wonder how much is practical. Pretty obviously the gate part is, but they have merged that so much more effectively, where in Rings of Power you can really see what's a physical, practical set and what's the 3D, fake background. House of the Dragon looks so much better overall. This is a brilliant scene. Otto is talking with his daughter, who is also the queen, and he just lays everything out clearly. No pretense anymore. And it's a powerful scene. He says, without, any subterfuge or anything like that, that the princess, she is going to be challenged. She's a woman. He feels Otto is convinced. And this is where we see that, Otto, he might not have necessarily been working just only for his own, benefit. He legitimately feels the fate of the realm will be at risk if a woman takes the throne. And it's inevitable that there's going to be a civil war. And then he says that the princess, who will become, the queen, will have to secure her power. And to do that, to secure her claim, she will have to put to death your children. And he says of course, Alicent's children. So put her children to the sword. Look, it hits very powerfully. The performance by the actress who plays Alicent is just brilliant. Another pretty cool castle. And this, I want to slow down and just analyze the castle design here, because it's a mix of some more kind of cathedral-like elements, but they're high enough up and there's battlements and everything. It's not the most perfectly defensible castle, but in terms of something that's fancy and for show, which you get the impression, because look, there's no big massive wall on the outside. Still, not the best defensive castle, but very fancy. They've depicted the king very self-sacrificing. He is in pain, he is suffering, he is diseased, and he's still doing what needs to be done for his family, for the realm, for what he thinks is right. I love his character. His character is just wonderful. This is, there are so many brilliant scenes. Here is another one. And so we have this character who he appeared in episode 2 or 3, I think it was 2. But there's so much subtext where he talks about how this flower, shouldn't be in these environments, and yet it's thriving in spite of it, which is clearly kind of his painting a small allegory or metaphor for the princess there. So the setup of the whole conversation just flows so naturally and logically. He mentions that, it's dark days, because of he mentions the flower, and the princess says we've had a nice summer, be it it's pretty, overcast in the scene, and he says it's dark days for the realm, and then that leads on to his comment that, it's sad that her father, Otto, former hand of the king, has left. That was somewhat of an injustice. Queen naturally asks what he knows of, her father's leaving, and he offers that, perhaps she is in need of an ally, because her father obviously was a strong ally. But then the queen answers, I am the queen, I'm in no shortage of allies. And he responds, indeed, like the princess, perhaps, which very well might not be that type of ally. And it's all led into a kind of a bombshell that he wants to drop on the princess, which is that, you heard the princess is sick, that she took a certain tea, and she knows what that tea is, and big implication there, because the tea wouldn't have been taken to the princess, Rhaenyra, if she wasn't suspected of doing something which gives the queen, Alicent, more reason to suspect her, the queen, what she did. And so it's a very subtle, manipulative conversation that's structured very well, where everything is, subtly structured to lead into the conversation that he really wants, to reveal this bit of information in a subtle way to the queen, and I'm sure we'll find out what his motivations are to do so. But this is a very significant thing, and leads to so much in, what will happen with the queen's motivations. There is a brief exchange here that I wanted to point out, because it just highlights one of the criticisms I have with Rings of Power. And in Rings of Power, there are baffling non-sequiturs where a character will say something, and then another character doesn't answer the question or acknowledge what was actually being talked about, and then responds with something completely out of context, and you're just wondering, why did they do that? Where here, in House of the Dragon, there is a non sequitur that's done intentionally. And so Viserys, the king, is meeting his powerful family to propose a marriage, and there is a new hand of the king. And so obviously the host, he'll comment on it, congratulations, and then that leads him to just say pity about Sir Otto, who was the former hand of the king. And watch how Viserys responds. It's like, he doesn't want to talk about that. And so he kind of just nods, looks sideways, and purposely changes the subject to, despite spending most of my days amidst the grandeur of the Red Keep, and then he comments how nice this area is. And so look at that, a purposeful change of subject because he doesn't want to talk about something, a non sequitur, but done with actual intent, okay? Because the writers here know what they're doing and they are competent, where the writing in Rings of Power is just one small example amongst a host of criticisms I have with Rings of Power. Check out those in-depth reviews if you want to see what they are, because there are a lot. The king also hears about, because he's been at sea and so he hasn't been privy to lots of information, about Daemon's wife passing away. And so he asks how so, that the lady Rhea Royce passed away, and then they mention a hunting mishap. She was thrown from her horse, and her neck and skull both crushed in the fall. And just look at the reactions of the characters. This is what I mean. Everything is done so intentionally with care and consideration, where everyone's not really buying it. It's like, interesting. Both the back and her head was crushed. And I look at it, they're like, this doesn't really seem to make sense. And they're still telling stories by showing so many interesting things. This is their son who is getting betrothed to Rhaenyra, and they openly, not openly, yes, they actually talk in a subtextual language about him being gay. And it's just, very well executed in terms of the way they, some people have different preferences. Some people prefer roast duck versus roast pork or something like that. And it demonstrates something that the characters, when speaking about delicate subjects, they like to speak through subtext, essentially, metaphors. Which sets up a later scene, but this isn't the first time that they have done this. It just demonstrates that what happens later on is perfectly in line with how the characters like to talk about these types of things. I did have a question, though. It's like, she seems to know really clearly that, the character that she is, being betrothed to is gay. And she says, that's fine, you can enjoy your thing, I'll enjoy mine, we'll do our duty for the realm, and leave it at that. He seems perfectly happy with that. And I was wondering, how much of an open secret is this? It would be really weird if she knows, but the parents and also her father doesn't know. But then, the very next scene, they acknowledge it. The parents are aware of that, and the mother actually says, it's a bit of a problem, and the father just thinks he'll grow out of it, but the mother's like, don't think so. It's actually quite important that this relationship is contextualized. So you find out that, we already know the guy's gay, but this is his boyfriend. And it's important to establish their relationship being so close because of what happens to the boyfriend in this episode. Then we cut to a scene with Rhaenyra and Ser Criston. Great scene. Makes your heart break a bit for Ser Criston because he's actually in love with her. And it sets up what happens to Ser Criston really importantly. He basically offers, take you away, we can run away, be in love together. And Rhaenyra says no, she doesn't want to give up the crown, which breaks his heart. And we also find out how serious this is to Ser Criston. This is why I feel like they're doing justice to this character. He says that, one of the greatest things in his life, the thing that he values most, is taking on the White Cloak. It's the biggest, greatest honor he's ever had. And this is very consistent with what was previously shown in the other episodes, right? But he betrayed that oath in sleeping with Rhaenyra, and he thought one of the ways to get, do penance for that is by marrying her, riding off to the sunset. She says no, and he realizes that she just wants him around to be his whore, which basically is true. And from his perspective, that's just soul-shattering. He's in love with her, run away. She says, no, but we can still have our fling. And what's really interesting about this, it shows how selfish Rhaenyra is, and this is really selfish, where she is not considering what actually would happen to Ser Cole if it's found out. She'll be scandalized and bad things, but he'd be executed, okay? And she doesn't seem to give a toss. And so the betrayal that Ser Cole feels here, and what it leads him to confess, is perfectly well set up and shows her naivety and also her how unfit she really is to be the ruler. And I kind of like that. Even if they're going to be going down the road where she's going to fight to be the ruler, they've shown her that she's got character traits that don't make her fit for rulership by any means. And so, yeah, this is where he is explaining he broke an oath of chastity, and he is distraught by that, okay? I feel it humanizes Ser Cole. I think it's great characterization, and it's set up very well for what then happens a bit later. So remember, Alicent, she was just told by that guy that the princess has had a certain tea, okay? And that tea would only be given to her if she might have been pregnant. And so who would be the next most likely person who has been around the princess, saw her movements, to be able to confirm if she actually did something bad with Daemon? It would be Ser Cole, her bodyguard. And so this isn't just a convenient contrivance where she just happens to pick the person who the princess really did sleep with. No, it's the next most logical choice for the person to question. She doesn't want to question the princess, it's a delicate matter. And so, as her bodyguard, Ser Cole should have information on what he's observed. It's perfectly fine. And in terms of the person who the princess would have, decided to jump, right, get in the sack, right? She's like Ser Cole, he's close to her, they had a relationship growing, and so it all fits in very well. It actually plays out very naturally. And then the queen here starts to speak in subtext, because this is why that other scene where the princess was talking to her betrothed was really important, because it shows that when talking about delicate matters, they speak in subtext. And so the queen here just says that something may have occurred. The princess might not be as virtuous as it might be implied. And she says, to question the virtue of a princess whom I hold in highest regard is bad, but I, however, do wonder. And so this is natural. What I love, this is one of those perfect examples of when two people are having two different conversations, yet it's justified in this scene. I have heard some people claim that it's unrealistic for Ser Cole here to confess to her, but in what's being said, from his perspective, it sounds like she knows everything. She's trying to find out if Rhaenyra slept with Daemon, but she's trying to be delicate and not spell it out, and so she's questioning the princess's virtue with the very man that took away that virtue, you could say, though she might have taken his virtue, and I think in terms of the power imbalance, it's probably more a more fair way to apply, his virtue was taken. So going back to this scene, as I mentioned, this, from Ser Cole's perspective, just sounds like he is caught out and the queen knows, even though she's just trying to be delicate. And so he confesses to it because it's also, he's heartbroken and feels really guilty about breaking his oath. She plays it very, very subtly and coolly, where she doesn't reveal any more. She thanks him for it. He basically says, look, I would rather be given a merciful execution and not be tortured. Because it sounded like he was caught out. So anyway, this isn't, to me, a contrived situation. I felt it played out very naturally, shows the competence of the writers, and it's a bombshell. Like, Alicent was not expecting to find this out, and for me, this was like such a crucial moment for her motivations, because it means that the princess, who will now be the queen, might very well have illegitimate children, okay? Which means the future heirs, the heirs after Rhaenyra, her children, would have a lesser claim to the throne than her own children. And it also shows her lack of judgment. And remember, Rhaenyra lied to her face. In context, she said she swore on her own mother that Daemon never touched her, but she also said that she was still a maiden. And it's a lie by omission, by not, of course, mentioning anything else. And so Rhaenyra has definitely been extremely dishonest to Alicent. And if anything, you can really see this as a betrayal. Alicent has done everything, doing her duty for the realm, the crown, her, duties as a wife and mother. And to see Rhaenyra just go off, do what it would be seen as a betrayal. And for me, this is the moment of decision for her where she decides the children that Rhaenyra will be unworthy to take the throne. And if her children are going to be put in danger by people not accepting Rhaenyra as queen, as her father said to her, the only way to give her children proper safety is to make sure they end up becoming the heirs. That's it. I feel this is as I mentioned, the moment. Small little things to appreciate. And look, it's the beginning of the scene, going back a little bit. But Ser Cole is asked to sit, and he has his sword in a sword frog or carriage, and he just, easily slips out. Look, we see it right there, and he puts it next to him as he sits. I just love little details like that. It's very similar to the sword frog I own, actually, and it's the very reason why I prefer a sword carriage or sword frog, because it's easy to, remove the sword, and when you sit down, I just like to see it. Also, nice sword. I like the sword. Have a look at, these. The dragons look great. The boats look brilliant. This is a beautiful show. It looks stunning. This is a far, to me, far more visually impressive than Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. And it's a visual spectacle that you can really enjoy, and they're pretty darn consistent as well. And I just love, there's so many well-done medieval elements, and even if it's a fantasy interpretation, it's executed really well, which just draws me in. And so we're at the kind of pre-wedding feast. So this isn't the actual wedding, it's they're just celebrating the beginning of the festivities. And throughout this whole scene, the whole feasting scene is just a joy for me. There is so much going on. They are very careful to show the characters' expressions, who they're looking at, who they're watching, what they learn from it, who's inattentive, who's very attentive. And you can see characters learning things in the moment without anyone needing to say a thing. You get to see how uncomfortable Ser Cole is seeing the woman he loves being, betrothed to another man. And so he's not happy about it. And when this happens, and so when Daemon arrives, I just cheered, because of course he would. He is such a stirrer. He's such an agent of chaos. You're like, of course he would come. And what's great about this, right? I didn't actively think of course, Daemon will be there, right? But when he did arrive, I realized it's so in line with his character. He is, and it's brilliant. And what also is brilliant about this is the implications. What could happen, but also what it says about it. He's strutting, he's throwing his, weight around once again. And this would tick off the king. It's a bit of a challenge as well, being uninvited and all those things. And so when Daemon arrives, it's just wow, anything could happen. Chaos could ensue. And so what I really loved about this, the show got that reaction out of me from a character appearing, entering a scene. Nothing else happened, but a character appeared, and I just went, yes! All right? If that is not a sign of the talent and quality of this show, I don't know what is. Because it could only have gotten such a response from me if it wasn't set up so well, where I have such a strong understanding of this character and the implications and what might happen with him, dropping in on the wedding unannounced. And so, yes, the characters have been very well defined. The plot and what's happening behind the scenes, the politics, the motivations are also well defined, that when something happens like this, I instantly understand the implications, where it could lead, and I'm on board, I'm invested, and the show deserves huge credit and praise for achieving something like this. It's brilliant. Look at everyone's response. The characterization that Matt Smith is giving Daemon Targaryen here, just in his walk, look at how he is strutting, right? Everyone's responses are letting us know very clearly how they're feeling, and Daemon is just strutting down, being the agent of chaos he is. It's so good. So good. And of course, the king, he's just like, what do? I can't really make a scene, so bring a chair. Daemon sits down, everyone starts eating, and then, so the king starts to give a speech, and then is interrupted again with the princess. Now, this moment, I loved, okay? I particularly loved. The execution, I admit, is a little clunky, but I'm glad they did it. I'll talk about the execution in a minute. So the queen arrives, interrupts the king's speech, which could be seen as a slight, but it's also asserting something that she hasn't done in the show yet, her own authority and importance, okay? She hasn't really done anything like this, or we haven't seen her do anything like this. And she arrives wearing green. This would have gone completely over my head. I don't know enough of the lore of Game of Thrones to have known the significance of why she is wearing green. And so here is another very important point of comparison between House of the Dragons and Rings of Power, because it shows one way in which it's done vastly better compared to Rings of Power, which they do a similar thing and it's awfully done. And so what it is, there is important context that the audience needs to know to get the implication of what's being said by the Queen, Alicent, arriving wearing green. What is the information? It's that there are certain signal fires amongst the high towers that they light when they go to war, and it's iconic because due to its green flame. The colour green for the high towers is the colour of war. And the Queen arriving in green is essentially a declaration that she is declaring war. That is hugely important. I wouldn't have known it at all. And so you need to give the audience, me specifically, that information who doesn't need it. And so how are you going to do it? You need a character to explain it through exposition somehow. So they just quickly have a character explain it to another one, kind of whispered like, oh, because you can see everyone's reactions. They're like, what, you know, this is pretty significant. And the way that they did it, and so everyone stands, and so yeah, and they just have a brief conversation between these two, right in the midst of his speech. So yeah, the king won't be happy. So he says, so the brother is saying that, and then the brother with the disabled leg replies back, everyone's looking and they're thinking. And so this is where he says to her, and so this is how you can convey information to the audience by having what's essentially Watson, Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Watson is there not only to be Sherlock's sidekick, a lot of it is also to justify Sherlock explaining things to Watson so the audience can get that information as well. Now, don't know if the character here should already know that. It doesn't seem like he's particularly politically savvy, and so that's fine. And so he says, the beacon of the high tower, do you know what colour it glows? And it's like, when Old Town calls its banners to war, green? Nods. And so, to me, like, yes, that's clearly for the audience, but it's executed in a vastly more justified way, okay? And even if the brother who is talking to knows it because he says, oh, they wear green, he could have just guessed that because of the colour of the Queen's dress. He might not legitimately known it. And even if he did, it's also stating the importance or significance. So sometimes when something significantly happens that someone else knows the significance of, sometimes you do like to say it to them just to kind of point out how big it is, to emphasize it. And so, yes, there are times in real life when you would explain something to someone who already knows something when it's justified. This is a scene to me that was far more justified to do it. It could have worked better if there was legitimately someone who did not know. And they were looking around like, why is everyone acting so nervous? And then he leans in and says, do you know what? Well, green is the color of war, right? Would have been executed a little bit better, but the information is so important, I'm really glad they let us know, because I wouldn't have been able to figure this out through the context of the scene, so it was necessary and they did it. Contrast that to Rings of Power. Like, we give so many examples. Just look at our Rings of Power reviews of things characters state that not only does everyone in the scene already know that's what's happening, but we would be able to figure it out through the context without anyone needing to tell us. But the writers of Rings of Power thinks the audience are idiots and they need everything spelled out. Perfect example is when Durin arrives to participate in the rite of something Tarag. And he goes, the rite of Sigyn Tarag. And then he goes and says to everyone who already knows, the dwarven test of endurance. And then he continues to say, we will keep breaking rocks until one of us ceases. And it's like, we could have figured that out so easily just by showing. We know it's a rite. It's some type of contest because they're versing each other. It's a dwarven type of contest, and they're going to be hammering rocks until someone... Oh, so it's a dwarven test of endurance. No, you didn't need to tell us, Durin. We could have seen it so easily. And they do it multiple times when they tell us things that are so blatantly obvious through the context of the scene, and they say it to people in the scene that clearly already know that, so why on earth are you saying it? Here is, on contrast, as I mentioned, in House of the Dragon, it's necessary information. I wouldn't have been able to figure that out in context. And I'm so glad I did, because when they dropped that line and I suddenly understood what the Queen was doing, it got an audible sound out of me of like, oh, yeah, because it's war. The Queen is declaring war. Do you see how invested I am in this? I'm just like, oh, man, this is awesome. To me, this is as engaging as like a battle, right? Because it is a battle that's happening, but it's not a physical battle. It's a battle of politics. Now, I still probably will enjoy battles because of swords and stuff, but this scene just made this episode for me. I bloody loved it. I love this exchange between the cousin of Daemon's late wife. He believes, rightly so, that Daemon killed his wife, and he wants to see justice, and Daemon is just like, who are you? And so he's a bastard. He really is. And the way he plays it, then he reverses this on him very quickly, where he wants justice and is like, you know, you better be careful making accusations, Daemon's saying. And I was almost thinking like, they could come to blows right here and it would be perfectly in line with Daemon's character. He would not hesitate murdering someone even at a pre-wedding feast. And then he says, oh, by the way, my wife and I didn't have any children. She was set to inherit lots. Yeah, but that means I'm in line to inherit all that, which puts that guy on the back foot and sends him down. But things very likely will happen or as a result of all that. But yeah, Daemon, he flips it back around and threatens him in return, basically. Ugh, wigs look bad. The hair just looks bad. Here is where the boyfriend points out Ser Cole as the one that the princess is clearly, you know, in love with. And they, and this leads, you know, him going forward to speak with Ser Cole. He says we should swear to guard them because if they are kept safe, then so are we all. And by implication of what Ser Cole does a bit later, it seems like he must have taken this as a massive threat, that he knows what's going on. It could lead to not only Ser Cole's death, but it could lead to horrible things for Rhaenyra as well. The thing is, though, we don't actually know exactly what sets off the fight. It seems like Daemon must have done something. He grabs Rhaenyra, starts dancing with her, and he even starts to pull her close to kiss her, which, this is a pre-wedding feast for Rhaenyra. If Daemon kissed her in front of everyone, that would be unbelievable. That would be war. That would be crazy, okay? And then the crowd moves, it blocks. The king can't see anything what happens, and that's all we see. It looks like Daemon's about to kiss Rhaenyra, and then a scream happens. We don't even really know where Ser Cole is at this point. There's just a scream, people start clamouring, a fight has broken out, and the only time that we see Ser Cole doing something is after a good while has passed, and they're just wondering, like, what's going on, what's going on? And so the show clearly wants this to be left ambiguous, that it's like the chaos of the crowd, barely anyone got to see what's happening, and so the audience then doesn't get to see what's happening. The king doesn't even know what caused it. It was blocked from his view, and so they're all wondering what's going on. And finally, we see Ser Cole and is beating down on someone. There is a question, like, why isn't anyone coming in to stop this? We don't rightly know because we don't know what caused it. This is a world in which if there is a slight done to someone publicly and they try to challenge it, everyone will step back and watch until someone gets killed, okay? We've already seen this in this series when it was episode 2 or 3. Episode 3, I believe it was. No, it was the beginning of episode 4, sorry, where it was the young guy being insulted and they pull out weapons and they just fight until they kill each other and everyone watches because it was basically a duel. And it could be that there might have been some type, if both of them draw weapons and they kind of nod, it's a duel. So this is what I like, okay? We don't know, and there are multiple ways to interpret this based on what was previously set up to try and explain why this has happened. And I could be wrong. What I speculate, someone else might have it right, because obviously they did it intentionally. But what I like about it is that there are multiple ways of interpreting this to try and find out or assume or explain how the fight broke out. There are other kind of theories, speculations, that the Valerians, the house, might be happy that the boyfriend is dead, because that could, like, if it comes too public, that is in a relationship with the, who will be the king regent, they might want that relationship to end. And so several things could have been orchestrated to cause this to happen. Like I said, multiple theories and stuff, and it's going to work in the show's favor. People will start speculating about this theory crafting and everything. There'll be videos about it. It'll cause discussion back and forth. It'll make this show trending, and well done, clever to them to do it. I personally like that they've left it in the same level of almost ambiguity as it is for everyone else who didn't see what actually triggered the fight, like the king. We saw as much as he did, and now we're left wondering, well, how the hell did this happen? Okay, and left to speculate on top of that. It feels like you're almost part of the scene a bit, in a really intriguing way. And then I like that the nobles are like, we are out of here, we're gone. It's like, party's over, clearly. Everyone clears out. And the very next scene, again, they don't explain why, but the very next scene, they're just getting married. There's no week-long tournament or anything. Get it done right away. And look, multiple ways to explain it, because the king, he starts to bleed. His nose starts to bleed. This could be, he feels like he could be ready to die. Get it done straight away. Also, before any, political machinations, fallout happens that could call off the wedding. This is an important alliance. So basically, they're getting it done right away. This is another great example of something the show purposefully does not explain to, most likely, its benefit, to foster speculation and discussion around the show. And the other side is, it doesn't really need to explain it when there is a lot of answers that you can easily kind of intuit and come to based on what's been previously set up in the show. This isn't like when a show doesn't explain something and we've got nothing to go off and we're just left, why the hell has this happened? It's completely contrary. Like, for instance, Galadriel deciding to what looks to be spoilers for Rings of Power. Look, she jumps off a boat at one point. I'll leave the context and everything there. It was one of the most ridiculous things I saw in the episode. There's no reason, in actual fact, it's confirmed that she was throwing herself into certain death. Oh, look, spoiler, it's a crappy show anyway, spoilers. She's throwing herself into certain death. If she hadn't been saved by pure luck and happenstance, okay? And she was, it's so dumb, so astronomically dumb, because there's nothing to logically, validly explain her choosing to commit suicide, okay? Contrast, where here, they're getting married right away, no hesitation, no waiting, and multiple reasons to explain it by the context of what's been established in the show. Good show versus bad show. Pretty clear. Shows Sir Cole, and he's not in prison, and so this is where, this will inform the speculation. It seems like whatever happened, from the context, whatever people can gain out of it, that this might have been a justified duel to the death based on some severe slight, or someone saw someone challenge someone else, or an act of violence was done towards someone. Remember, he is the Queen's bodyguard. It's his job to protect the Queen. And so, sorry, the princess. So it's the princess bodyguard, job to protect her. And all he had to say is that this guy was threatening her life. His life was forfeit. I was doing my duty. Even though he's clearly distraught by it all at the end, there, like I said, multiple ways that can explain it. If the show does venture to give us the real explanation, I do hope it's going to be a good one. And then very like who knows, we'll have to wait and see. It cuts back to the marriage happening. It's almost like a shotgun marriage is happening. So Cole's about to, kill himself. And he is stopped by the Queen Alicent. Again, implications, right? Why would the Queen want to make sure that he doesn't kill himself? His evidence to the Queen's not being a maiden, let's just say. And if she wants to have a bit of leverage in her corner to challenge the princess, Rhaenyra's claim to the throne, well, she has Ser Cole right. And by the way, Ser Cole, he feels betrayed by Rhaenyra as well. So, the show demonstrates a lot just by showing, and then it doesn't even hold your hand. It leaves things up for our own interpretation. Good on it. Back to the wedding scene. And Viserys basically collapses. If this is his death, what a tragic and wonderful character. I've loved Viserys in all the episodes he's been in. He's been my favourite character so far. And if he does die here, it fits very well in times of when it happens. He survived just enough to try and gain security to the realm. But he could, this could just be collapsing into sickness and could lead into other things. And then the episode ends with a rat drinking up the spilt blood on the floor in the throne. House of Dragons episode 5, guys. Flippin' brilliant. I loved it. Honestly, the show is getting better and better for me. I hope it maintains the quality. I really do. And if it does, be up there with some of my most enjoyed shows. It's such a great medieval fantasy. It's got awesome looking swords and armor and everything, good writing, storytelling, characters. Some things that I don't like, of course, I don't like nudity and other things like that. But I can look away and look past the things I don't like to see what is genuinely very well made. This is really, really good. Can't wait for the next episode. And finally, something I can enjoy. It's a show we can just watch and enjoy. What a rarity these days. What did you think? I'd like to hear your thoughts, and of course in the comments down below. And as always, stay on watch.
Shadow of the Conqueror is coming to you in an epic graphic novel adaptation with the incredibly talented art of Mike S. Miller. The book will be separated into 4 graphic novel volumes. This first one, entitled Enemies of Self, has 48 pages of stunning art visualizing the amazing and unique world of Everfall with some of the best work Mike has ever done. With special collector edition covers and limited Everfall merchandise, this is your one and only chance to secure these special versions of this phenomenal epic fantasy graphic novel. Chronicles of Everfall, Shadow of the Conqueror, Volume 1, Enemies of Self.